right. Well, welcome. I am so excited that I have a wonderful special guest with me today on Internal Comms Pro, the podcast. Pinaki, you're finally here. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm a fan, and this is amazing to be here. Thank you.
Yes. Well, it's great that we finally are connected. I know that our paths crossed. I believe at first it was at an ALI conference, but there's so many wonderful thought leaders and players in this amazing internal communications world. And you're one of the big players. And so I'm just honored to have you on our show. Tell a little bit about, your backstory, because you don't necessarily come from the internal communications world, which is why I'm always excited to have folks that are in the world but might have a different lens or looking at the internal comms world from a different background. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. And thank you for saying that about me. It is very true. I don't come from internal comms, but I have so much experience from so many different places that I could bring it together to help it all out. Quick backstory, all my life I wanted to be an engineer because my dad was one. And somewhere in grammar school and high school, this kind of like creative juice came out of somewhere. I think it was someone telling me that they could draw better than me, and I said, no, you can't. But, in grammar school and in high school, I found myself wanting to be a designer and an artist and a writer and write poetry, and I wrote some fiction. I also got into like DJing and music production, and somehow I was on the football team as well as the debate team. So I grew up in a place that had high amounts of diversity, and it got me doing a lot of different things. In going to college, I told my dad, yeah, all right, so I want to get into design. And he was like, no, you're going to go into engineering. But I ultimately graduated with computer science and psychology, mainly because I saw what the internet was doing at the time and what software was becoming at the time. And psychology, I was just very interested in it. But at the same time, when I graduated, it was about that time, the early 2000s, late 90s, where the tech bubble burst. So graduated computer science, all tech jobs just pretty much went away. And it was a great startup era, if you remember that time. So I found myself in a lot of startup and smaller companies doing an array of things. So I was a technical writer at some point. I was an office manager, project manager. I was also a technical recruiter. And throughout that time, I had linked in or connected with a group of colleagues that I had in college who were starting this company called Localism. And I did work with them on the side to learn design and web design and really hone my skills there. And from that, I got my first real, career job or a big job at a larger company at Johnson & Johnson. So I started as a web developer, then moved into senior web designer. From there, I went to a large agency called Avenue A Razorfish, which is just now Razorfish. But there I worked on a slew of really high-profile websites. Like I worked on Ford Motor Company's corporate site. I worked on Merrill Lynch's high net worth site, and I worked on a site for Microsoft in their Sync My Ride product. And from there, I essentially joined Localism full-time as a partner. And it's been 14 years ago. And at Localism, I first started as director of user experience design. I worked in sales and marketing. And then somewhere along the way, I started up another company, which was a product company. So I got into product management. And now I'm the CEO of Localism and a co-founder of that company. And I get to kind of bring it all together. So it's just like a combination of skills and roles and things like that, that just, maybe it's from my DJ days, is just mixing and mashing it all together to create something new.
I love it. I love that. And it's part of the reason why I was so excited to have you on the show, because you bring all, like your entire self now has come together in this moment And I think it's going to serve our listeners really well, because our season, for this season's podcast, is all about closing the gap. It's having our audience really look at where they are and how can I take just the next step in pushing myself to where I need to be. And when you and I were talking in our journeys together, gallivanting around the internal comms world together, I quickly picked up not only about your entrepreneurial and innovative spirit, which a lot of our listeners want to be innovators and they want to figure out how to do that, but also not only the artistic, but you've married your process engineering brain. And that's what I needed when you were talking about this story of having a roadmap or a blueprint that we're going to talk about on the show today. So tell me a little bit about where you were when you thought of this idea. And now it's, I've watched it come to life literally from the back, I think, of a napkin that you sent me a screenshot of it. And now it's real. And we're going to get into it today. And for our listeners who are listening just to the podcast audio, know that we are also providing a video of this, because what you have to show us is also so visual, so they can kind of see. And we're going to provide this in our free resource guide. If you go to internalcommspro/show notes, you can get this wonderful guide that we're going to talk about today. But tell me the origin and the idea of where this blueprint came from.
Right on. I think it is really akin to what we were talking about before, just bringing together things. Like even my company, Localism, we bring together, the idea is to bring together great design and technology. So we recently redid our mission and realized really what drove us was that our ability to give customers the time and headspace they need to be strategic leaders in their organizations. And we did that by taking on the nuts and bolts of their strategy, predominantly design, technology, right? And as I was thinking about this, how we are uplifting internal communicators and allowing them to do this, this idea struck me. And it came from a variety of little things that happened. But in terms of content production and communications teams, I realized that there was no framework that allows people to see where they are, envision where they want to go, and just have a high level plotted course to get there. Like a lot of times people are just kind of thrusted into internal comms, and it's kind of like an open world, and the options of what you can do and what you can start working on are quite vast, right? So what we did was we created this maturity model or a framework, and it helps you to identify just that, where you are with your team right now, see where you could go, and find a way to get there.
Yeah. Well, and we are right smack dab in the middle of our podcast season. And so this whole time we've been talking about so many wonderful concepts and we've had so many wonderful guests, but I like that we're going to kind of pause in this moment of the season to say, okay, let's go to Pinaki. He has got this engineering brain with an internal comms passion, and get organized. And I think it's going to be such a great show, because this roadmap that we're going to get ready to talk about is going to help our listeners really plan out for 2021. So much is going on, and there's so many also emotions tied to what's happening that I think it can also shine a light on why people might be feeling the way they're feeling with the kind of role that they might be playing. So I know, again, we're doing this video. I'm going to share our screen so you can actually see what we're talking about for those who are watching, and kind of go through this. So this is, again, a blueprint for digital content production teams is what you've called it. But for our listeners, it's for internal communication, where they can envision where they want to go and plan the course to get there. So high level, this has a lot of layers to it. Why don't you start with kind of going over how this is laid out, this roadmap?
Yeah, right on. So the blueprint consists of these 6 levels as you see across the top. And that's the first layer, is just the levels that we're in. And each layer is described by each level is described by 5 layers. The first is the work day, and basically it describes a typical day in the life of. It provides a high-level summary of like the team's wins and challenges at that moment. The next layer is achievements, and here we've identified 7 high-level milestones to reach an effective and an efficient communication organization. And those milestones include defining a communication strategy, defining your production process, creating a proactive editorial calendar, evolving your communication channels, having a consistent design and tone for all of the communications, being able to target your content to specific audiences, and finally, metrics that guide your decisions moving forward. And basically, like in level 1, the team doesn't have any of these achievements, but by level 6, they'll have fulfilled all levels and then have replicated them throughout different areas of their organization. Okay. The next layer is the team layer, and this lists like 7 key roles for ongoing production needs for a maturing squad, right? And these roles include comms director, comms manager, comms specialist, content strategist, writer, designer, and developer. And I've simplified these, so there could be different levels like senior, mid, junior, and etc. But I just kind of simplify them based on like just the skills that the team needs to have. And we also combine these team members with a full-time equivalent or FTE indicators to help you gauge the minimum time commitments that these folks should have, right? Because not every organization will have these roles as individual people. Because even at earlier levels, you'll see, I think teams will be a little bit more generalists, and later on, people will get to more specialists type of scenario. So far, making sense, Jivin?
Yes, I think it's so good. Again, and if you are just listening, make sure you download this wonderful guide that Pinaki's provided so that you can follow along as well. So, and we've got a couple more levels I see here.
Right. Yep. Yeah, there's the next layer is work volume. So throughout each level, I wanted to give just a high level depiction of how much work in terms of people hours is necessary to accomplish the achievements in that particular level to get to the next level, right? So for example, you see there's a surge of work volume in level 2, and that's due to the additional effort needed to like redesign and relaunch your evolved communication channels, because that takes a lot of time and effort there. But then you'll see it dip down afterwards once it's launched. And the final layer is business outcomes, because we really wanted to depict the visual graph to remind us that everything we do in internal comms needs to meet some kind of positive net results for the organization at large, whether it's increasing productivity, reducing turnover, a higher employee engagement or culture. Whatever we do, we are affecting change in the organization. And those are the main layers for each level.
Yeah. Well, and I love this because, talk a little bit about local wisdom so that people have a reference of kind of what you do, because this is a tool that you use when people meet with you. But again, I saw it through a different lens, because so many of our listeners are saying, I want to know what other teams are doing. Internal comms is still sort of, where does it fit? And so it's different in so many different companies, and they really want to be able to compare what they're doing. And they also need like a reference point, a North Star, like where am I, but where could I go? And so when I saw this, I thought, oh my goodness, this is so good. But tell us a little bit about, what does local wisdom do, and how do you use this?
Right on. Yeah, like the core of local wisdom, as I said before, is like really about taking on the nuts and bolts, taking on the tactical execution of comm strategy. So we typically help our customers with 3 things. We are launching comms platforms or redesigning them, whether it's an intranet or a website or a microsite or an email platform, anything that you're communicating through. And The other thing we do is we help manage the flow of communications through them, whether we're producing content, staging content, helping to manage the editorial calendar of the flow of content. And it's basically taking on those everyday tasks necessary to keep the flow of communications going. And finally, we have this scaled model. So, when certain customers have a certain volume demand, we actually place like a mini local wisdom that's dedicated to their team or a group of teams, kind of like setting up like a internal shared service to really amplify and boost the volume of work. And this really connected with us because we do things, right? As a tactical execution company, we're known for making it happen. And you could see the tangible like results of what we produce, like, oh, here's a new intranet, right? But what we wanted to get to is to really strategically go in and say, where do you want to get to? Because a lot of times communicators approach us and like, hey, we need an intranet and we need like an XYZ intranet. And we're like, okay, cool, that makes sense. They usually come to us with like a need. And we wanted to basically have a tool where we could say, hey, look, we understand your need and we'll help you there. Well, let's just understand the bigger picture. So this tool turned into something that we could all look at, understand, and start pointing at things like, so here's where we are and here's where we'd like to be. And that way we can identify ways in which we can help them get through there.
I love it. All right, well, let's jump in. So we start with level 1. Let's explain level 1 and dive right into this.
Right on. Yeah, so in level 1, it feels like a startup environment almost, right? Like there's like 1 or 2 creative people that are just thrust into the role, or they're really passionate about it and they just put themselves into the role. And I've seen it happen in both ways. But in this scenario, there isn't much structure. And comms seems to be like a barrage of tactical communication tasks based on the needs of the business. So everything is high priority and ad hoc and just kind of comes out of nowhere. The main accomplishment that you've achieved by simply getting here is by simply having leadership buy-in and say that this is a necessary function and we need you. But there's a lot to do. And in this level, chances are you don't have the right communication channels, or you've inherited something that is just not working well for you. And the team is very small. And, that's where we see you're just kind of juggling a lot and trying to manage the ongoing flow while still figuring out, all right, what structures do I need to put in place, right? And how do I do that without going insane, right?
Well, and that's why I love this blueprint, because if I'm at level 1, it totally validates why I might feel like I'm going insane, because now that I have this roadmap to give me a certain level of awareness, like I don't have a dedicated writer. I don't have a dedicated designer. I might be playing all those roles. This is why I feel this way. I notice real quick, on the higher levels, you see where you've got metrics that guide decisions, but it's not necessarily in level 1. Does that mean that at level 1, I'm not using metrics, or that's not important?
Yeah, good question. There's kind of a few things here to think about is that since companies are so different, like I feel like everyone is like an individual fingerprint, there's going to be little nuances here. But the way we define metrics in this one is you have a system of automated metrics that helps you guide your future decision making. In level 1, if you're doing kind of communication sporadically, ad hoc, and you don't have the proper communication channels, everything you're measuring is great because it can help you to, figure out what to do next. But you're not going to have a systematic, similar way to measure every time. That's why it's introduced after you set up your communication channels. So you have the right channels where you can draw metrics from. And we say we do it after you've created this consistency of content creation. So when you're measuring, you're measuring the same things, and you're measuring consistent things. So that way you could see how things go up and down in order to make good decisions.
Yeah.
But if I'm
Well, and
measuring
we've
two
had,
different things, right?
yeah, well, and that goes in line with some of our experts that we've had this year or this season on the show. You know, Pierre Leliniak from Google has said the same thing. Make sure you have a consistent measurement methodology. And so I think it's important to point out that you might have measurement, but don't feel the pressure of having this huge measurement methodology and all these things until you get some of these other things in place. This almost reminds me sort of like a Maslow's hierarchy for internal communicators. So
Yeah.
I that's why I love this. So we've got level 1. This is why you might be feeling this way if you're looking at this. Okay, anything else on level 1? Are we ready to go to the next level for level 2?
No, but just to really quickly echo what you were saying, I think since the world is so vast, that's why I think we set it up this way. I like the Maslow's hierarchy model that you introduced there. But that's the thing, like, instead of trying to get everything at once, let's just work on a few things and level up little by little. So that's why in level 2, we now get some help, whether they're freelancers, vendors, people from other areas of your organization. We just need help to kind of get through this, because we're just juggling the every day, and at the same time, the main piece of work in this level is to redo those communication channels, right? And the team really grows heavy here because of that heavy list of relaunching, I don't know, an intranet, an email platform, and all of that good stuff, because we know that those things require some extra help, right?
So
And that's why
feels
you'll notice that.
It feels like from level 1 to level 2, the difference is starting to transform from a reactive state to now we're getting a little bit more proactive, where let's think about the strategy. I like this idea of you don't have to do it all by yourself. You can pull in a team like Local Wisdom to help you, or I know Calvin Seaman from ATV Financial, he was on our show, and they actually pulled from different departments and then centralized their team, and it created a whole new team now of, like, all of a sudden now they have 21 people on their team, right? So I love that there's so many different options, and I love that you point this out in step 2, because sometimes if I am by myself and I'm reacting and I'm drowning, I might not know, oh, I could pull from an outside resource, or whether it be completely outside of my company or from a different department. So I love that.
Absolutely. And we found that a lot of times at this, like, level 1 and level 2, it's as internal communicators, sometimes we're afraid to ask or push, because we kind of go from this, like, hand-me-down type of thing, to like, hey, look, if you really want this to work, here's what I'll need, type of effect. Right?
All right. Next level, we got level 3. What's on level 3?
So at this stage, we've relaunched those channels, and now it's all around, like, the cadence of that content production, right? We've gotten to a good rhythm and a language while we're managing the work volume. So we have people, we have a new system, and what we want to do is make sure that the communication still keep moving, because, a lot of times we find our clients at this stage, like, they just relaunch their things, and there's this excitement and fervor around it. And we want to use that momentum forward and not let that fizzle out. So it's sort of like the team is really working on the consistency of content and really how to break out messages to targeted audiences at this stage.
So if I'm looking at this, who is this blueprint really for? Is this for a decision maker, or if I'm young and I'm trying to just personally grow in my career, who was this? Did you have a certain person in mind when you designed this?
Yeah, actually, it is all of the above that you mentioned, but I think the core really is around, like, those aspiring internal communications managers, right? Those people who are building, managing, or overseeing communications in their organizations. I think is really what I meant this for. Especially if you're, like, kind of in these earlier stages, in order to just basically see where you want to go. And since everyone is telling you to do like these achievements on this list, everyone is telling you that you have to achieve these things. That's a given. We know that. And your organization is telling you to do more with less, meaning I want you to do all of this without hiring any new people. And I wanted to give them a tool that's just not fair, right? Like to expect a really small or one or two people to accomplish so much with so little is not fair. So I wanted for internal communicators to have the confidence to say that, look, this is what I need. And for people in like leadership to say that, look, this is what your people will need to do this. And for anyone aspiring, it's just great to see it overall from beginning to end stages and what it looks like.
Yeah. Well, when you're coaching your customers, how do they, when they are moving up in these levels and they get more resources, do you coach them on how do they communicate that from a strategic position to leadership? Like, what's the process of pushing them to get to level 2 to level 3, or from a level 4 to a 5?
Yeah, it really kind of goes into like I really use the organization's objectives to my advantage at that point, and that's why like those business outcomes are always there. So hello, you want us to achieve A, B, C, and D, and in order to get there, we need these things, right? So let's make a case. Let's make a compelling case. Let's help you to create that presentation, create that pitch, figure out how you want to like position yourself to that. And that's really the idea. It's like, at the end of the day, we find, I've heard communicators say this, like, oh, I just want to go to my leadership and pitch that I need a new intranet. And it's like, you're just kind of pitching, I need this thing. And what leaders are thinking about is you're just pitching me to spend money. But if you change the conversation to, you have a goal for us to achieve A, B, C, and D. In order for me to do that, here's what I'll need.
I love that. I love the changing the conversation, because then you can say, and you can make it manageable. So if you want this, then we need these 3 things. If you want this, this, and this, we need these 5 things. But this roadmap, I think, makes a manageable plate of what we can tackle. So this is awesome. All right, what's on level 4?
Yeah, so level 4, your team starts to look more like a well-oiled machine, right? Like communications are flowing consistently. It has great design and tone standards, right? And you're talking to specific audience groups. So, everyone doesn't feel like they're drinking out of a fire hose type of thing, right? The team here now kind of grows relative to the volume or the needs of the organization. So the team can grow and shrink depending on what you need. But at this stage, I think leadership should be noticing like a change in culture and positive outcomes from the business. This is now where we work to really soup that up by working on those automated metrics, dashboards, and frameworks on how you're going to continue to prove it and how you're going to continue to tweak what you're doing to have even better results, right? And again, that's not to say that you don't like look at metrics earlier, but at this stage you have the channels and the cadence to be able to accurately get that baseline and to plan out your future state.
Love it. I love it. All right, so level 5.
Right. So this is where things get interesting, right?
Yes.
And I guess it's an important thing to note that throughout all of these levels, there's no winner or loser here, right? So you don't have to go to level 5 if you don't think you have the need to, right? But level 5 is where we introduce more of a comms director and really spending a lot of time with the C-suite and leadership, because now the team has grown and shown success we're now able to is branch out and support other areas of the business, right? So like through sharing best practices or tools or even sharing people and team members, the team is now like turning into a center of excellence within their organization, right? So now we're trying to like uplift other areas, comms functions throughout the organization and level them up. And here we have a full team really making a positive impact and uplifting the employee experience as well as the business outcomes for the company.
Yeah. What I love about this is it feels like many internal communicators have been with COVID-19 pushed to the center stage, and leadership is pushing them to level 5, but they don't have level 5 resources. And so I like that this gives them a language to guide leadership so that they say, okay, if you want this, well, we got to come up with, they might look at this and say, oh my goodness, I'm at a level 2. Like we haven't defined our production process. So I can't get metrics in place quite yet until we start to do that. And so that's why I think this tool is so valuable. I have never seen anything like it, and why I'm excited for people to see it, because it's going to give them a sense of control and clarity and confidence so that they can map this thing out. When you are working with folks, what prevents them? What blind spots as I'm working through this? And I know we still got to talk about level 6, which I'm so excited about. But before that, what do you see happen sometimes that prevents people from moving, up a level?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things, but I think a lot of times it's not able to basically get your head above water, right? It's not able to just get past the everyday needs of the business, because it could be daunting, and it's just like constantly, oh, now I have time to work on my strategy, for example. Oh, but then now we have open enrollment coming in, and all of a sudden we have this business change coming in, and so business life just gets in the way, and it'll always somehow fill up your bucket, right? And so this is the idea, to be very diligent about like having a focus on like the 1 or 2 things you want to do next while still managing that workload, that everyday workload. I think that what gets in people's way is sometimes they try to do everything, and they do everything or they do most things, but it's not completely there. So yeah, maybe you have good processes set up, but maybe they're not as thorough, and you're wasting time doing something, or there's more errors that come out for some other reason and things like that. So we're not really focused and just kind of done multitaskingly. It's not fully succinct and sound, so that creates issues as well. Another barrier is also like getting the team that you need, right? So I think a lot of times people feel like I need to hire a full-time headcount in order for me to do this, and that's partially why I put that FTE in here, is that sometimes you don't need a full-time headcount. You do need a solid team, but maybe that's needing like 10 hours a week of a writer rather than a full-time writer.
Yeah,
things like that. So let's not try to boil the ocean in both respects, right?
Yeah. But, being an entrepreneur myself, and I know you're an entrepreneur, we can certainly empathize, because I'm sure they feel that, and maybe this is why I'm so drawn to internal communicators, because I empathize. I see myself in the early entrepreneurial days of having to do everything. And I feel that coming out within them. They are an intrapreneur, really, within their business. It's very much like a startup, where one day I'm doing this and then the next day I'm doing this. And when you're switching those skill sets, it feels like productivity can go down. I know one thing that helped me was making sure that I set time aside to think and be strategic. Like, I'm taking 2 hours out of my week to look at this, and then to be able to get above that everyday work, to speak to it, to leadership, so I can be seen in a certain way, but keep moving, the strategy and the department, and growing my team and moving it forward.
That's so important. And the scary thing about that It's just taking out like that time to think strategically and get your head about that. When you actually do achieve it, you almost might feel guilty, like I'm doing something wrong, like I'm not working right now, I'm not writing something like that, like, so like it's just the getting okay with that, is that in that of itself something to overcome and could be a barrier.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So level 6, the last level, tell us about level 6.
Right on. And level 6 is where now you've now set up multiple local comms teams throughout the organization, right? And at this stage, communication is seen as a driving force in the organization, right? Like, not only is communication affecting business outcomes or accomplishing business outcomes, but it's also influencing the strategies that the business should take on. Because at this point, we're turning into this kind of omnidirectional communication system. And hopefully that happens earlier on too, but communications is we're communicating in all directions. So across, up and down, in all different directions. So as I think internal communicators are this function, if we're trying to affect employee experience and engagement, we need to be able to take what we're learning from our people and bubble that up to leadership to then say, look, retention has got to be like a strategic imperative for 2021 or whatnot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. And yeah, and that's really kind of like what 6 is about, is really becoming a true communication force and using what we've learned to create pockets of local communication levels. Because I think when it's done really well at a local level, it could like, spider out and really create this passionate, driving workforce. So like a level 1 or 2, I'm sorry, I was just gonna say a level 1 or 2 could be thought of as a local version of a level 6. Not to get too inception with it, but.
Spoken like a true engineer. I love it. Well, on our prep call, you were talking about this blueprint also serving as a foundation or a stepping stone to get to what you called a solid team X factor. So tell me what you mean by that.
Right on. Yeah, I think, so one thing that my rational brain, I probably could now that I'm challenging myself inside my mind to do it, I probably will. But the one thing that's really hard to depict in this model is the value of teamwork, right? And the close-knit nature of what an exceptional team can do together, right? Yeah, sure, you can have people that come together and perform tasks, but that's really different than having a team of people come together who are really passionate about reaching an overarching objective. So one of the things that we do to create a tight-knit team is just making sure everyone is on the same page as far as where we're at and where we're going. So a model like this can serve as a really good way to say, let's all get on the same page. Let's all get excited about getting to this level 5. And let's all think about what we're going to do to hit these achievements. Because once you have people who are passionate about that North Star and getting there, that goes beyond just a doer and someone just checking off the boxes and doing stuff.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. So when you're thinking about, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say one of my clients said it best, and it just stuck with me. She said, we just got her past like level 2 to level 3, and now she's kind of at a level 4. But when we got past this level 2, that big hump, she said that, like launching that mobile intranet was definitely a heavy lift, and there was definitely pressure, but it didn't feel like such a heavy lift because everyone was lifting together. And that really struck me. And I just like, that's amazing that even times of stress and even times of pandemic, when we're all working together, all accountable for the work that we do, it just doesn't feel as crazy.
Yeah, for sure. So what do you think's coming? We're heading into the fall, and by the time this episode will air, it'll be, around the end of October. and people are getting geared up. What's coming? What trends, you work with so many different types of internal comms teams. What are you seeing out there? Give us, you're blazing the trail, and I feel like you're ahead of us. And if you were to yell back at, those of us back here just with our, treading water, what do you see coming for the internal communications industry?
Yeah, the one thing I feel like this year has taught me, like trend wise, it's just like anything can be just broken and like just set aside in a whole new way. Like the level of disruption that we've felt in this year is beyond any other year in my entire life, probably for most of our lives. I think one of the things that's been in my mind that I see is interesting is that we, from an internal comms perspective, I've been really thinking about, the job market and the people in that market, because we've just kind of hit this job market, this number of jobs just like plummeted, and it's coming back up, but it's nowhere near where it was before. And I get depressed and saddened when I see the open to work rings on like LinkedIn profiles now. And I've been really thinking about this idea of like incremental work, right? For one side, we have companies that either have a need because they've like downsized, or we have companies that have been really thriving and they have a need because they just need help. But in both cases, they might not have like just like the budget or the where or what they need to just hire a full-on team of full-time people. And so I've been thinking a lot about this incremental working. So we have a bunch of people who have skills that are in the market, and we have a bunch of companies that need the help, but just this kind of full-time model doesn't make sense. And at the same time, this freelance model is like every time I have a need, I'm not having to go and find someone and restart that up, is also not very efficient. So I've been thinking about this model of like incremental ongoing work, which is really akin to our subscription service. So, how can I support you by getting you, 5 hours a week of a content specialist and 10 hours a week of a writer, maybe, a few hours a week of a content strategist. So how can I formulate a team that is incremental rather than full-time to help both sides adjust to what we're facing right now? That's what's in my mind. I'm not sure if it's a trend, but it's something that I've been contemplating to see how we could create a win-win scenario.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and again, this blueprint, I think, is also, it's so well done that it can, I think, empower that internal communicator who's finding themselves much like a startup, much like an innovator, entrepreneur. How do I just get from point A to point B? Again, close that gap so that I can show a little success, but yet I think have the freedom to test things and to make mistakes and to really innovate through this, crazy time. And then to have, I think certain teams like yours and even tools. I mean, we've got wonderful sponsors and tools here on Internal Comms Pro. It seems like engaging a tool to automate some of your work, or a team like yourself who knows how to navigate through the roadmap, could they potentially leapfrog? Like if I'm at 2, I could potentially very quickly get to a 5 and get to where leadership is pushing me. I mean, this isn't like, is this going to take me years to get from a 2 to a 5,
Yeah.
or could I accelerate this?
That's a really good point. And like the one like layer that you don't see here is a timeline, right? Because that could be very variable, right? But yeah, I think so. I think you could, like we got from like the level 2 to the level 3 in a matter of months, at certain points. And then other people like could get stuck in this like level 1, level 2, just trying to get what they need from leadership, and that could take years. So yeah. It can happen in both ways, but I think just the ability to see this should help expit things. And that X factor,
it feels like a business accelerator, like if you are going through, and if you are, this reminds me of like if I was a startup and I needed to have an accelerator to get me into the market much more quickly, this feels like this. And so that is why so many people can use it. So we talked about, again, on our prep call, just the rewards of having a roadmap like this. Lay those out for our audience today.
Yeah, honestly, I was thinking about that as like rewards of like the ultimate company, the employee experience and culture. But honestly, I think you just tapped into something that was really neat, is that accelerator, right? Like in startup world, we have accelerators that help us, give us models to move up. Internal comms world, we don't. And I think just by seeing this, being able to like stop guessing of like all the things that I need to do and what should I start with and what should I do first, second, third. Here's a map that you could work on and just start moving, get moving to help accelerate your internal comms. I think that's the biggest value that an individual or a team would see. And I think as a corporation, I would hope, and I would like everyone to be able to drive business outcomes as well as create an employee culture that could withstand anything like a pandemic or emergencies and things like that. Because the last thing you need in the time of crisis is distrust or a bad culture, because that is just going to halt a whole bunch of things.
For sure. Well, I love it. And I love, my favorite thing about this, I feel like the Mr. Rogers of the internal comms world. I care about everybody's feelings and how they're feeling. And this validates that I'm not crazy, that if I feel underwater, this is why, but yet it helps me just get my head above water to see the map. Like if I'm thrown in the middle of the ocean and I'm drowning, now I know, okay, that's the shoreline, and I know where to channel my energy and where to start swimming. And to know that, that's why I love our collective, that we're this community. You're not by yourself. There's so many options, more now than ever, that you have to get a life raft, to get you to that next island, to get a break. And then, one day we'll all be sitting on the beach drinking a Corona together. I shouldn't say Corona though.
I wonder what Corona is.
That's a bad pun. Right. A nice cold glass of water. So, all right. Any other lasting thoughts or tips? How can people get a hold of you if they want to engage your team?
Yeah, I typically tell you, you can visit our website, localwisdom.com, and go to the contact us form. But for your audiences, and feel free to get in touch with me. You can find me on LinkedIn, Pinaki Kathiari. I'm the only Pinaki on Twitter, literally. But I just love to talk about this, see where you're at, and help you. So if I can help you, like personally, and just to be a sounding board or a life raft, that'd be great. If I could help you, with what the services of my company, that'll be also great. I just love to be a part of that journey that you're in, from getting from here to there.
I love it. Well, you're such a huge friend to the internal comms community. And like I said, I love that we've got somebody that thinks with an engineering brain to sequentially map this out as a sequential process. I think it will resonate a lot with, the type of listener that we have. And that, again, would give us such confidence and now clarity on where we can go and how we can close the gap to get to that next step. So I can't thank you enough for being on our show today.
Thank you so much. I'm honestly so very honored to be here and be able to talk through this idea that I'm excited about. So thank you so much. And for your listeners, I truly wish that, this gives you value. And that's really my ultimate goal here, is I would just love for this to help you in even a small way. That'll be a win for me.
Well, stay connected with us as we, head into the fall and the winter. I'm sure we'll be re-engaging you on our next step for the next shoreline that we reach.
Right. Would be happy to. Looking forward to it.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Be well, everybody.